wide open. So, Dietrich. I was, so how did you do that?
I think it should be working.
Okay. So just a few precedents, artists who inspired me in some way in the back of my head. Of course, Jack Kerouac, who wrote the book On the Road in 1957, and famously pasted a bunch of pages together to make a continuous stroll to sort of capture the seamlessness of the creative endeavor and of the road trip. J.B. Jackson, when I was in Alabama first teaching, I wandered into the libraries when you still found on the shelves and found Landscape magazine. And I was out in the American landscape for the first time in a really long time. And I was inspired by his wonderful interpretations of the American landscape. In 1951, he founded Landscape magazine, and he really, he believed that the landscape was not just the natural environment, but the human humanity. And he also had a taste, not just for the road. He taught at Harvard and traveled himself on the back of a motorcycle to New Mexico every summer. And he had a love for the mundane. This is one of his sketches in the American landscape, as well as for the classically beautiful. Ed Ruscha, the photographer, I once saw this in a museum and was taken by this work, which is called Every Building on Sunset Strip. And what it is two photo montages. Of course, they were literally photos glued together in those days and published in an accordion or Leporello book. This is Ed Ruscha examining the work. And what's interesting to me about it is that it's sort of dispassionate. It's completely objective. He mounted a camera on the back of a car, a truck, and took a photograph every, so it's at once arbitrary and then the other at the same time quite intentional. And then David Hockney was always seeking, the immigrant to America from England, the land of closed-in spaces, was enamored of the Great American wide spaces, and spent, decades trying to explore different ways of exploring and of depicting it. In this case, this is one of his famous little photo montages. So each of those is a photo and it's big. And this is, I believe, Arizona. Am I right? Peach Blossom Highway. And later in his career, he embarked on a series of pixelated paintings. This one of the Grand Canyon. You can see it's 24 feet wide and 6 feet high and made up of a series of panels in an effort to try to depict this space, which is too big to see in a glimpse of the eye and way too big to see in the frame of a camera or mostly in a painting. So I've always been interested in frames, especially in travel drawing. Framing is what you do when you draw the world. You don't arrange it like a still life. You frame it in order to focus on what it is that you see. So I've looked at frames: horizontal, vertical, attenuated, multiplied, unfurled. Horizontal frames, drawing across the edge of the page implies extension into the space beyond the frame. This is very quick, just a vertical looking up creates a kind of a sense of attenuation, a sort of sublime tension. Looking through the interplay between the frame of the door or the window and the view it frames. So on the left, we're actually seeing the frame, my cousin's Paris apartment. And, here we're looking through the frame, and the frame in the center mostly drops out, and the focus is on the thing that is framed. On the right, this is a drawing of the lifeboats through a ship's window, and the frame disappears completely, and it's just the framed view. And at some point, I realized that one could, by dropping out, choosing to not draw a bunch of things in the world, that one could, in effect, find a frame and choose a particular frame. So these are two drawings. This is Ronda, Spain, where all the street creates a frame for the bull ring across the way, but is not the subject. This is on the right. Some of you may know this is the Islamic wing in the Louvre. So that's the, and the negative space of the stuff is framed by the floor and the ceiling. Whoops. The attenuated frame, these are just a couple of favorite drawings of my interest in the frame, which is kind of stretched and drawn. And then I realized that one could actually draw an attenuated frame, and I did a series. These are two of lots I did for a couple of years of what I call little slot drawings, where I draw the frame, and in them, you know, one discovers that space is paradoxically both flattened and deepened. You can read them both, so there's a sort of tension between the tendency to be flat and deep. And then on a day at the beach, I realized that with multiple frames, with the eye moving, rotating, one can create a sense of not just place, but time and space. And then I realized that one could also find sketchbooks. These were drawn on, you know, wide, a super wide sketchbook, and then doubled. So it's an opened up book. It's about this wide altogether. And one is horizontal. This is, of course, the Giudecca across the canal in Venice. And this is also in Venice, the really tall, skinny, narrow entry to the Arsenale Norte, which you will see in just a second. So this idea of panorama, you know, I really became enamored of the frame unfurled in some sense. And here, this actually drawing is you can see yourself over on the left, the larger drawing. And what I'm going to show you is the beauty of these panoramas, the unfolded drawing, is that they can be read as a book with individual frames. Here we're going to go through. And this is the way I draw them, 2 pages at a time, an open book page at a time. Or they can be read as a panorama. And I think maybe because this is right here, I'm not even going to open this up for you to see because you can see it in person, not take the time to expand it. And here's another, I've done a whole series around the island of Martha's Vineyard. We spent a lot of time, and this is just one example I'm showing you today to show you that, you know, so the panorama allows you to see, you know, sort of a built space, but also, you know, natural space and attenuated space. Oh, I just went in the wrong direction. I'm going to get better at this. Oh, here we are. So this is on a pond, just, you know, really, really shallow space and deep, you know, and attenuated. You see these little ospreys nest, the little teeny. Did we see? Oops! Did we miss the windsurfer? I missed telling you about the windsurfer. Look, there is one house. There's a little birdie, another little birdie, another house. Here we go. Oh no! Here's the windsurfer. Watch, we're not even halfway there. There he is. There he is. So it's a windy day. And we come full circle. So these panorama drawings are about full circle. And there's something sort of magical about the fact, I don't know how, but when I draw them, I usually end up right at the end of the book, full circle. Okay, so I have to now go smaller in order to exit. I'm going to get good at this. Okay, so I have to get a little smaller. Hang on. There you go. Okay, and then I embarked on it. I realized that we were really on this ship traveling around the Mediterranean, and I started drawing whenever we arrived in a new port, drawing the arrival and sometimes the departure and sometimes just. So I realized it's really quite lovely to draw, you know, on while moving. So this is the Straits of Gibraltar, you know, it's this really intense moment coming through out of the Mediterranean into the Atlantic, and you know, just fast, you know, it's whipping by, you're sliding by, just trying to capture the moment. And you can see this ship racing. And then I was leading the study abroad program, my students in Spain. And I did a series of drawings in a long, skinny sketchbook on a walk. This is a day's hike, a long day's hike. You start in the city, there's that bull ring. You look through the gates down into the landscape. starting vertical, it's into the streets and out into the landscape, and then breaking out into the wide open space. I rotated the sketchbook horizontally. And this on the right is actually, that is this famous, I forget what it's called, but the famous, it's a bridge, and it's actually at the top above the arches where I was looking down through the Great Down. And then all the way around, sort of panoramic, but in multiple slides, and then back up the hill. And then I really had fun on this. This was in a little teeny book like this. So these little slides, I apologize for the quality of them. Little teeny book on a bus ride with my students from Lisbon to Seville. And here we go. These are multiple. So each one of these little things is a little, and really watching the landscape transform as you travel through it. You can't spend too much time, just little animals, little things, the industrial forms, the highway, the beautiful barns, the fields, the mountains in the distance, the clouds in the sky, the view through the driver's window, and ultimately, here he is, hi, Mr. Driver, ultimately arriving in the mountains. So from this sort of flat landscape into the mountains. And then I also started doing plane drawings. So I would, these are not entirely, this one I did when leaving Phoenix, moving to Chicago. So we lived in Phoenix for 4 years, just sold the house and flying back. So this was a sentimental journey. And a lot of this has great meaning to me. The little landmarks in this have great meaning to me. So here we are, and this is taxiing around. And you see that Phoenix, is called the Valley of the Sun, which I didn't understand until I moved there, but it's surrounded by mountains, as you see. And the planes are moving around. You've been there for that stuff, the planes and the little light posts and all the kind of industrial stuff of the runway, the little lights. And then I captured, framed through the window, Camelback Mountain, the famous Camelback Mountain, just to give it a little bit of emphasis there. All the little stuff on the runway, the little guys that are icing, not in Phoenix, they're not de-icing, but and there's little downtown Phoenix in the background, where we live, if you know it. And here's Camelback again. We're rotating around and around, you know how you do. And then suddenly we lift off, and this is South Mountain, where we'd go hiking, and it's just beautiful. And then I'm not going to stop and tell you all the little things I made, little notations, and that's something interesting to point out. A lot of this is notational. It's making a record of what you see, and then you pull away and up into the landscape, and you start seeing, I have a note somewhere where I say end of settlement. Yeah. End of settlement. So Phoenix is one of those places that there's built form, and then it's nothing, desert, but also then I think that's a little later. Yes, here's end of settlement. And then these are actually reservoirs up in the mountains that feed the communities in the desert. That's a little marina. And then here's what's funny. I actually was so into it, I ran out of paper, and the rest of the trip, I only had a couple of pieces of paper, but then I drew just blind on top of all over itself. And you see the crop circles and all the difference in the river. And look, I say, not the Mississippi. Yes, the Mississippi. As we go to Chicago, and then whoop, we arrive in Chicago. There we go. Okay, so now I have to go again. So, and finally, give me a second. There we go. We arrive at this train journey, which I do have to say, credit to actually Amtrak did not sponsor this. It was supported by a grant from the School of the Art Institute, where I was teaching at the time. They gave me 2 grants 2 years in a row. This was one trip across the country from Los Angeles to Chicago, and then a year later from Chicago to Los Angeles. Conceptually, spiritually, it is one trip. So I wanted to tell you a couple of things. So this is the road, and we went from, can you see my cursor? Yes. So it's Los Angeles. And what's interesting is that this is Arizona. So I was asleep here. Okay. So these big things, sleep. I wake up in the desert, and then New Mexico is really long. Wait till you see. And then fall asleep sort of in here. and woke up actually in Kansas City, which is funny. I'll tell you when I get there. I forgot that Kansas City is on the eastern side of Kansas, so I thought I was in Kansas when I was in Missouri. Anyway, to Chicago. And then the second trip was up through Chicago and across the lakes and to Boston. Okay, and this was the schedule. So the whole trip took 36 of those little books, 2 of which are laid out there. You can take a look at. They're in these little 5-inch. So laid out on top of each other, 5 inches high, they'd be about, I don't know, 12 foot high on a wall. You know, they're each about 80, 90 inches wide. So there you go. And you can see in person how they can become, so they can be seen in lots of different ways. And to me, this is the beauty of the thing, that on the one hand, it was quite literally linear, but on the other hand, it can be seen and explored in different ways. So the other thing things I want you to note, we're about to take our little trip. Yes, so this is not all of them. This is the first leg. The file was too big, and I'm not even gonna, I mean, I can make it a little bigger to let you see a little bit, but we're going to, let's go. So this is a way you can see it as a sort of a fabric, you know, multiple images, and it's scanning down. You see the landscape change. So the things I want you to look at, I'm going to scroll out now, get back before starting you out, are, you know, here we are. I got to do a little bit of in and out here. So we're about to start our trip. So what I'm going to do here is take you on this journey. This is an edited version. This is probably half of the images because it was simply too big and would take too long. But I'm going to take you through scrolling as the landscape goes by. And the thing to keep your eye on is watch the horizon as I was watching the horizon and the natural features and the man-made features and the industrial features and the agrarian features as they, and occasionally a little living thing, as they change across the American landscape. So here we go. You ready? We start out slow. That was in the station. Here's LA. Remember, in Los Angeles, there's the skyline. I'm going to do a little editing and we'll speed up and slow down. So this is in the evening, 6 at night. We're leaving the station. Beautiful kind of aqueduct there. Okay, there's the little Los Angeles skyline. I think that's one of the freeways, don't know which. And the mountains in the background. We're traveling sort of north before going through the mountains. And the sky is darkening. And then, whoops, a little stop in Fullerton. Oh, this is chopping off the names, I'm sorry. Anyway, mountains and the darkening sky across the mountains, and those wonderful, crazy palm trees, you know, that they have in LA behind the crazy traffic at the end at 6:30. So it's rush hour, everything. And there you go. And then it's too dark to draw. And then we wake up in Arizona. Home to me, a little bit home, familiar landscape. So this is in Flagstaff. And the landscape consists of the horizon and these beautiful sort of low conical mountains in the background. This was a dawn sky, by the way, very colorful. And we're running parallel to Route 40 across the middle of Arizona. And actually here in Winslow, I believe we intersect with Route 66. And so this is kind of settlement. And this is a very quick picture of a whistle stop of the Posada that used to be this fancy hotel. We went there for lunch, for dinner once, beautiful old hotel. And it used to be a big stop because it was on the train across the country, each stop. But on this, it's just a little bit. Okay, so here we go. We go again, and you watch as the landscape sort of opens up and folds out. And notice the little buttes, the little buttes with a little crinkled rock. Do you see? This is all red rock. And we're still in Arizona. So there are these crumply, it's getting higher. We're getting higher up in the landscape. Occasional industrial thing. Look at the little windmill, an old fashioned windmill. And then some highway stuff. We're still next to the highway. And then we're climbing. And we're really now up in the Red Rocks. And I believe, yep, now we're at Gallup is the first stop right on the desert. So those high mountains are where, if any of you have been to Canyon de Chelly, for instance, where Ansel Adams did his amazing things, we're in those. That's what we've just. So here's Gallup. I would stop and I would draw each of the stations when we stopped, sort of one per minute. And I would, so there are three kinds of stops. There's the change the sketchbook, write down where we are, what time it is, which I haven't been doing, Gallup 8:42 a.m. There's the station stop, and then there's the lights out stop, and a little bit of eating. Okay, so really now it's this incredible, these big, beautiful, humpy sort of red rocks. This is a famous kind of, I forget what the name of this is, painted hills maybe. Very characteristic, and I want you to point out this is early morning, so the sun is coming from the east, the light is coming from the east, so the left side, the west side of all of these things are in shadow. So I try to capture that, and then we sort of spread out again. Oh, there's McDonald's, just in case you want to stop, but I can't because I'm in the train. Anyway, here we go. So we have all those little crinkly flat top things and some stuff going settlement tucked into the valleys. Little, I don't know what's, cell tower, a little bit of maybe trees in the landscape, little cows, steer. And look, we're pulling into Albuquerque. I want to remind you, this is probably half the drawings. There are lots of other little in-between ones, repetitive or otherwise. So here we are in Albuquerque, and then whoop, we leave Albuquerque. So we slowly settlement, back up into those beautiful flat top mountains. This is like climbing in the mountains. This is like Taos. I mean, I don't think it is Taos, but it's, might actually be indigenous settlement forms. And quite beautiful. Look at the little vegetation, clumpy little clumps of vegetation and actual house. Really hard. I'm an architect, so I don't understand architecture, but it is hard to draw architecture at this speed. I'm going to tell you. Did I mention most of these? I've unintentionally chopped off the time. I write the time at the bottom, tend to be about a minute per and about an hour per sketchbook. So here we've slowed down enough because we're pulling in. And of course I can't read it, so I forget. I think this is Lamy. And look, there were some guys on the side of the road and I just had to pull out a colored pencil, right? And then we pick up again and we have these beautiful sort of almost human figure mountains and a beautiful, notice the highway. Sometimes the highway is there and you don't, till there's a car, you don't notice that it's there. Winding through the mountains, we're starting to climb northwestern Arizona. And if I did this as an exhibit, I would key these to the map so you could see where we are at each time. We have this beautiful rolling sort of crumpled background, but the roads running in the foreground, and then we get some lovely fences in the foreground. And this is sort of what it becomes for a while. And New Mexico was really long, interestingly enough. And so lovely little stuff, little bales of hay. Oh, look at llamas. Had to stop and draw them. I don't know what the thing on the right is. Creeks, probably. Some little buildings, and then we're in a town. And this is the town. Gee, I'm sorry, it's cut off. I believe this might even be Las Vegas, New Mexico, which is a stop. So notice the telephone poles and the roadways receding into the landscape and the almost ever-present highway that we're usually running parallel to. And I think I might have to go a little faster. We're never going to get through this. So I have to stop talking and just let you look. But you got the idea. Oh, but this was rain in the distance. It wasn't raining on me, but the rain was like figural. So I really am going to stop unless something. Beautiful conical. And often, I just have to say, often sequential drawings are of the same thing as we're moving past. Okay, so this is the same conical butte, just drawn as I'm sort of moving around it. So now we're into the edge of New Mexico and into Colorado. This is called Radon. Do you see the little sign? We're in Radon, New Mexico. And now we're really up in the mountains. we're in the mountains, we're climbing, we're in a kind of valley, but eventually we actually have to climb, and to the point where we're looking down, and then whoop, nighttime. Okay, so you take a little breather while I get us out of here, and then you will wake up, as did I, in Kansas City. I overslept. I was supposed to wake up at 5 o'clock, but I didn't. And so I woke up at 7 o'clock in Kansas City, and I was so befuddled that you'll see I keep saying I'm in Kansas, and of course I'm in Missouri. But anyway, no difference. So here we are in a city, and there are all kinds of big freight trains, lots of freight trains, tanker trains. We're in train world for a while. Suddenly train close, that is. Okay, whew. Now we're out in the landscape again. And watch how the landscape has changed. So there's still some mountains in the background, but mostly the horizon is occupied by a stand of trees. And those trees are usually related to the farm. And of course, the vocabulary is now stand of trees, grain silos, little houses, and the ubiquitous irrigation things which make the crop circles that we see from the plane, that we saw from the plane. Over and over, you see these, a little more train going by. I cut out a lot here for some reason. And then what's interesting is as we get further into Missouri, we're like more in like the Ozarks, we start to see water and bridges. Okay, so we see the bridge, then we're on the bridge, then we see the river below, and then we still have this landscape. And suddenly you see power lines, not just telephone lines, you see power lines and cell towers, and lots of them. Here we have, this is an airport. I made a little note of it, just in case. And those are, you tell me, bales of hay, I guess, right? Okay. And here we go. Little hilly. I'm guessing it's in the Ozarks, right? Little hilly. Some beautiful little yellow flowers. And here we are in La Plata, Missouri, where we're at guess what? A grade crossing. How great is that? Right? So for once, we're the ones, those are the people waiting to get across, and I'm actually in the train. And look, there was this also road construction and red lights, and it was so fun there. And now here we are in Missouri. I'm going to go quickly here, not too much going on. Grain silos, roads. At one moment I had to draw because suddenly we have vegetation at the side of the road, which we didn't have in all the desert. So I thought, oh, this is fun. Let's draw some up close foreground. So I did that for a while. And then here's a river. And we seem to be in Iowa. And suddenly, suddenly there's a river in the background, and more trains and more trains. Industrial. Here we go. This is some town. And look what happened here. Oh my gosh, we're crossing the Mississippi River. And it occurred to me, like, as I'm in the middle, I'm like, oh yeah. And I love the fact that it's this momentous moment. It's just mundane. It's just another frame, another flash by on the train. Can't stop, can't look at it. So we get a few glimpses of it as it twists and turns through this little bit. We're only in Iowa for a nanosecond. I learned by looking at the map later. There's the river in the background through the trees. And here we are now, Iowa to Illinois. And Illinois, the farmland in Illinois, well, you'll see, it's really, really consistent, beautiful, beautiful horizon, beautiful foreground, little plain. And this is arriving in Galesburg. Nice little place. And then back to the open landscape. All of our friends, but look, we have a new piece of vocabulary in the Illinois landscape, in the American landscape, and that is the wind turbine. And there's a huge one, there are big ones in Texas, but a lot in Illinois that you see actually from the plane as well. And here we are in Princeton, Illinois. Beautiful. Suddenly I'm drawing the actual fields themselves. In the thickness, you see they're planted, so we're seeing the fields as kind of a carpet. and more wind turbines, wind turbines, wind turbines. And what's interesting is as we approach Chicago, which we are doing, we get the stations, or look at that one, you see through the, suddenly you see it through the trees, and the stations are closer together. The towns are closer together. You see the little water towers, the lots of power lines, little towns, crossing over, we're lower. Oh no, we're looking down actually, and then under. Interesting. And here we are in Naperville, which is a suburb of Chicago, and that's the metro. This is a significant, living in Chicago, I know that this means you have arrived in the greater metropolitan area because that's the commuter train, double-decker commuter train. And here we are, little towns, little towns, little towns, little towns, little towns, little towns. There we are. Chicago. There it is. That's what we used to call the Sears Tower, the Willis Tower. I think that's Trump Tower, maybe. Don't know what that is in the background. Okay. And then one more. Oh, look where we are. In Chicago, in the station, at night, it's dark. So we can't really see much, just little lights, a lot of little lights and industrial stuff and just city stuff, little bridge. I think we're coming out of, oh yes, you see a little Chicago skyline in the background. Even though it's dark, you can see the skyline, just little snatches of things, snitches and snatches of things. And we're now in the East Coast, and notice immediately we have deciduous trees everywhere. And what happens is that we lose the horizon a lot, you'll see. It just, disappears in different kinds of ways. This is, by the way, not a mountain, that is a landfill. And something that you don't see so often out west. And, so it's very fragmented. We lose that beautiful continuity of the landscape, and the landscape becomes episodic rather than scrolling. Occasionally, oh, and by the way, this train is called the Lake Shore Express. Did I mention that I went to bed in Chicago and woke up in Ohio? We're now in Ohio. So I missed a big part of the lake, but actually you couldn't see the lake that much, but here it is. We're somewhere in Ohio, and you see glimpses of the lake. We're traveling east. That is also landfill. That's another wind turbine. There's the lake, hiding in the trees, peeking out, and then suddenly we get an actual glimpse of the lake shore as it winds. And that's a little marina at the bottom there, and some trees and more lake. And look at that. We see in the middle there, that's a far shore. And I actually think I wrote Canada on it. I don't know if it's Canada, but I thought maybe it's Canada because we're right. You'll see we're rounding the end of Ohio into Pennsylvania. Lots of, you see industrial and wind turbines and stuff and trains and stuff, industrial power lines, trees. And here we are, this is Buffalo. In a place with actual buildings, and this is some tower in Buffalo, and now we're leaving Buffalo, back out, cell tower, lake. Here we go, lake. And this, I decided, see this thing where I have all that was like 80% of the time. Was like you're in there, they buffer it from the rest of the world. So in the train, you're just surrounded by these stands of trees, and it's very hard to see. So truthfully, that should have been a lot. I should have had about 100 pictures of that. So here we go. We're now in New York State, and I believe the next stop is Syracuse, if I'm correct. What does that say? New York. Thank you, Marty. So, it's episodic. Little cities. And what happens is the landscape is gone, and I'm doing those little found frames that I told you about, finding things to draw, little things down at the foreground. Here's a perfect example, a little bit of settlement caught between the trees and the ground, the ground caught between the vegetation, and this is actually the Erie Canal, the old Erie Canal. I knew because there was some kind of little sign. And then a lovely little picturesque landscape. right? Like they would draw in England. And then here we go again. So here's the thing. I was expecting on this leg of the trip to see the beautiful Berkshire Mountains, but it turned out, well, we're not quite there yet. It turned out that okay, where am I? This is Syracuse here. This is Syracuse. And it's kind of great. There's little, like a stadium and all kinds, some actual beautiful little architectural objects that we fly past until we're back out onto the road. This is someplace not Syracuse, a little, goofy old train at the station. And then these are the Adirondacks. We're looking north to the Adirondacks in the background. So we do see the Adirondacks. And it's quite lovely, right? And pretty consistent. And here's there's a fair. It's early September, so there's a fair. And now we're in the land of rivers and trestle bridges. And look, we're actually on one here. This is in, what does it say? Oh, I don't say, but it Schenectady, I think it is. I'm sorry, I cut off the little things. But it's quite wonderful, right? Being on the trestle that you've been seeing. And here's this New York State town. We go across town. Very hard to capture all the little houses and stuff. And what you see, this is interesting, is what's happening is we're getting actually into the Berkshires. And instead of going through them and above them, we actually go sort of under them. And you see we're low down. That's the stuff is way up at the top of the frame because we're kind of buried in a valley. And then we emerge a bit into a town. We're almost there. We're getting there. And more trains, town. This is Massachusetts now. This is, I believe, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Mountains, little airplane, little looking up. And this is Worcester. Anybody recognize Worcester from here? This is Worcester, one of those endless, those are all the little houses and then the churches and this endless kind of loft building, old industrial building. And, objects, very frustrating, I might say, to draw. And this was a lot of this. So I started drawing these little negative spaces that just trying to find something. This is characteristic of this, you seeing through. I was trying to show you how you had to see through this, grill of vegetation everywhere. And now this is a town, it's got churches and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And that town is Boston. And this is it. It's dark and they're little. And we have arrived. And I don't know how late I am now. Oh, a little, but I have one more little special treat I'm going to do for you. And that is, oops. Let me think how to do this. So I have to go smaller. Okay, so fasten your seatbelts. You ready? I discovered that it also works as a flip book, and it's like a little movie. And really gives a sense of time, space, and place, big place. You've seen it, so you recognize some of it now, whipping by, right? And this is every image. These are all the images. So the point is, it's not a drawing. It's not one drawing. It's the whole thing as a piece that is, it's about capturing the place, not about making a perfect representation. Getting there. That was Worcester. There you go. Thank you. We'll just leave this up because it's kind of great, right?
Thank
Or
you
do-
so much, Marthe.
Shall we put the lights up?
Questions?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm curious if, as practice almost an annotational style or having a landscape itself, where you develop a lot of changes in places and you develop yourself a bit travel
You know, I'm having trouble a little bit hearing with the mask. Can you repeat it again?
Sure. Just asking if as you develop this practice for notating.
Yes.
You've also felt that change internally as a traveler, as a visitor to these spaces.
Well,
In humans.
I mean, as I said, I can only answer the way I began, which is, you know, drawing is a way of taking the looking and turning it into seeing and understanding. And so and as Hockney said, you internalize it. So like I have this landscape in my heart, you know, and so it changes you only in the way understanding anything. Changes you as a person, you know, I know it somehow. Yes.
Do you take photos also?
No. I mean, and actually when I've led study abroad programs where I teach drawing, I forbid my students to take photos until they've done their requisite sketches. It's hard. I mean, on this trip, I did not take photos. Some places, you know, if I'm traveling a place that I haven't seen, I take photos, sure. Yes, absolutely. But usually I draw first. Yes,
It's interesting to see that occasionally you would color in something.
yes.
You hold back deliberately on going back and trying to color other things in.
Yes, I see it. It was a mistake. I panicked the night before and thought it would be really boring. And I went out and I bought a little teeny set of, you know, colors. And I started coloring a few things, and then I decided that I couldn't color everything, so I shouldn't have colored anything except for the few little things that you couldn't represent, you know, without color. So I deliberately, yes, held back, you know, instinctively, you know, when it was about color. When you're at a stoplight and it's red and it's going red and the thing is yellow, and it's like, how can you not? A lot of it was going by a little too fast to capture color. So at a certain point, I started a little bit and then I said, this isn't going to work. I better not. Good question. Yes.
I imagine you on the train drawing furiously all day long.
Yes.
And with people all around you. And I'm wondering if, you know, if this performance aspect has changed the way you think about drawing and how you think about these pieces in terms of performance.
Well, you know, I have two answers to that question. The first is that I was in a sleeper car. So for a good deal of the time, I was by myself. And that felt good, actually, because it required an extraordinary amount of focus, you know, it's sort of a marathon. And, you know, some people, maybe my kids, you know, were like, oh, you have to Instagram this. And I was like, no, this is about the process, you know. And I sent out a few at the end of the day. I sent out a few photographs to my family, you know, but fundamentally it was about the doing it. And I felt that strong. At some point, I went upstairs in New Mexico, you know, when it was raining. That whole stretch, there was one of those cars that has the you know, glass on both sides, big glass. And it was actually very interesting because there was a bunch of people who were sitting there for hours and hours, as I was, and they were getting to know each other. They were strangers, you know. So I had this soundtrack, you know, like, you know, of listening to people talking and, you know, kind of talking about life, and they were really kind of totally different, and they completely ignored me. I could have, you know, said, hey guys, you know, whatever, do you see what I'm doing? And I just didn't. And I'm there doing this, and they just ignored me. It's kind of interesting because a lot of places, when I draw with my students, you know, people come up and say, oh, but they actually, it was quite interesting, and it was kind of cool. So, but the answer to your question about performance is that I feel as if I do feel that it's performance art because it's in the doing, and that the record of it is as the record would be made of, you know, any performance artist, that there is some kind of record made, unless there isn't, but usually there is some kind of, you know. So to me, it's the record of the act, you know, and whether or not would be witnessed by others. I mean, I've talked to people about maybe recording me coming along and recording me. But it's really, to me, it's about the doing. The answer.
It's just so amazing to see how the tradition that I think started in the 19th century, people like John Ruskin drawing the clouds on his way to Venice, right, as a sort of continuous observation and in a way stopping time that way to a certain degree, or slowing it at least, you know, that you continue that. We talked earlier and you said you see yourself as a sort of 20th century artist, but you continue it obviously to the 21st, and this is just so
it's true. And you know, I didn't include when I was first teaching drawing for the first time, I did a lot of research about, you know, travel drawing, and I found a sketchbook, I think in the Met, I think, of Mary Newbold Sargent, who was John Singer Sargent's mother. And what's interesting, and she was traveling in the Mediterranean, which is where I was going to travel to teach travel drawing. And she did these sketchbooks that could have been by my hand. I just, you know, the interesting thing is that your hand, you know, I feel sympathy with Rembrandt, you know, any hand with a pencil in the hand and the eye and the heart, it doesn't matter when you were, you know. And so her drawings were almost eerily, felt like I could have done them. And then I read about her, and she was my age when she did this travel, and she would travel by, you know, she was on a ship. So she would do islands like the Gibraltar. They look almost identical to those little Gibraltar things. Yeah. So yes, I do feel myself in the tradition. I think that the difference, like I was talking to Dietrich about the New Bedford panorama, you know, that amazing whaling panorama. But I feel the reason I kind of say I feel like I'm a 20th century artist is that, unlike that was obviously done on a million sketchbooks and then taken back to an enormous studio and painted on these big canvases, for me it's important the being there in the moment and the drawing in the moment and this sort of uncritical, unedited view. It actually killed me to edit any of these out for you today. It doesn't seem inappropriate, but you know, so that is what I feel affinity for Ruscha and Hockney, and actually Andy Warhol. I didn't say that, but you know, his films of people sleeping or just sitting in front of the camera, you know, that sense that there is beauty in just recording life. Yes?
Was there another question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Have you had an exhibit of this work?
I have not.
Does that appeal to you?
I would love to see it on a wall. You know, I did it, I finished in 2018 and we moved to 2019. Pandemic, we all know what happened yet, but I would love to, I feel like it wants to be on the wall with a continuous loop of the little movie, you know. And I would also love to be able to show the map related so that you can understand where you are as you cross the country.
Maybe Brown could facilitate that.
Sure. Would be made possible.
There we go.
That's a great idea. So,
Great idea.
so
Looking for the wall.
Oh, yes,
I'm
exactly.
looking for the wall. It's about, you know, 300-400 feet long if it were continuous, you know, but it certainly could be shown as a kind of a weaving. Yes.
I especially liked the last image with the movement. I mean, that was so compelling. I've done some travel drawing, you know, and it becomes part of it. But that really moved me. You know, you could see the bumpiness of the ride and the changing of the weather and the days going by and the landscape. And you know, if I were to do an exhibit, I would definitely.
Yes, and you know, the beauty of unintended consequences. I had no idea that happened. I just scanned them all in and put them into a PDF file, and I was actually trying to figure out how to see them horizontally on a scroll. But I mean, you know, I just held it down. I was like, whoa, look at this. This is cool, you know, it's like an animation, and it was not at all my intent.
No, it was more, to me, it was more than animation. It was sharing life, you know.
Yeah.
Watching it.
Thank you very much for those words.
Wait, before I take our speaker, I just want to say 2 other words of thanks, which is to Reese, who greeted you at the door. She's an undergraduate student, and I think you'll see her again next door. And to Bridget, who is a graduate student and helped organize all of this and kept track of who was coming. And we're most grateful for this collaboration. Obviously, we'll see you all next door with wine and fruit and more conversation with you, Martha. But I want to, yes.
And if you came in late, feel free to, this is 2 out of 36.
Exactly, but it was just a magical, most magical journey that you took us on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.